She walked slowly toward the hall, the hum of chatter and laughter spilling out through the open doors. The sun had already dipped low in the sky, and the evening air was cool, brushing softly against her cheeks. People milled about, chatting in small clusters, adjusting their formal clothes, sipping their drinks, and exchanging greetings. She had no special invitation, no one to introduce her. All she had was a love for music and a quiet hope that today, maybe, someone would hear it. From the moment she stepped into the hall, eyes followed her. Not with admiration or curiosity, but with mild amusement. Some leaned slightly closer to their friends and whispered, giving small, barely contained laughs. Their words weren't meant to be kind. "Who's she?" one asked. "Does she even belong here?" Another muttered. She heard none of it, or at least she pretended not to. Her attention was fixed on the piano at the far end of the room, its polished black surface gleaming under the soft lights. It seemed to call to her, and the rest of the world fell away for a moment. She moved through the crowd carefully, trying not to bump anyone, trying not to attract more ridicule. Every step felt heavy. Every glance she caught from the people around her reminded her of the gap between her and them. They were all dressed in elegant gowns, sharp suits, bright smiles, and confident poses. She wore simple clothes, not because she didn't care, but because her heart was full of music, not fashion. She carried nothing but herself and a small, invisible burden. The worry that she wouldn't be taken seriously. The piano sat there like a promise, waiting for someone who believed in the sound more than the stage, more than the applause. It was massive, an old grand piano, with keys that reflected the warm light. Its presence was commanding, but she didn't feel intimidated. She had been here before, countless times in her mind, playing for imagined crowds, letting her fingers dance across the keys. Now, this wasn't imagination. Now, it was real. And the people around her seemed unaware of the magic she could create as she drew closer. A few people glanced at her again, this time with faint smirks and raised eyebrows. One man, holding a glass of wine, shook his head slowly. "She's going to play?" he said to someone near him, his voice full of mockery. "This should be entertaining," his companion replied, a teasing smile spreading across her face. They didn't realize the harshness of their words, but she could feel the subtle judgment in the room like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. It could have stopped her. It could have made her retreat and vanish into the shadows. But it didn't. Something deeper inside her refused to give up. She reached the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. She remembered the countless nights she had spent alone with a piano, teaching herself, learning the language of notes and rhythm when no one else would listen. Every note she had ever played, every chord she had struggled to perfect had led to this moment. She knew the world around her expected little. They saw a young woman with no fanfare, no reputation, no past performances that mattered. To them, she was invisible. But in her mind, she was about to show them a truth that had always existed. Quietly, patiently, waiting for the right time. Nearby, a small group gathered, curious. They weren't exactly kind, but they were intrigued. "Maybe she can play a little song," one of them whispered, smirking. "But it won't be anything special." They laughed softly, shaking their heads. Their judgment stung for a second, a fleeting ache, but it only strengthened her resolve. She straightened her back, took a slow, deep breath, and let her hands find the keys. The first note she struck was soft, almost fragile, but it lingered in the air. A gentle call that made a few heads turn. Some people looked surprised. Others suppressed smirks. They expected a mistake, a stumble, an awkward pause. But the note hung there, clear and honest. She pressed the next key, then another, and suddenly the piano seemed to come alive under her touch. She could feel it responding to her, lifting her spirits, whispering back with every sound she created. People started to pay more attention now, though some still doubted. A few whispered among themselves. "She might be better than we thought," one said quietly. The laughter was gone, replaced by uncertainty. It was a strange mix of disbelief and curiosity that filled the room. She didn't care about the whispers, the glances, or the previous mockery. All that mattered was the sound beneath her fingers. The music that flowed like a river she had been damming for too long. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music guide her. Every note told a story she hadn't been able to tell with words. It spoke of quiet mornings, of nights spent practicing in solitude, of dreams she kept locked away. Her fingers moved with a confidence that surprised even her. She realized she had always known this piano. Every key, every note. It wasn't just an instrument, it was a voice, a mirror of her soul, a way to reach the world without saying a single word. Some in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, not used to being still or silent. Music like this demanded attention, and it was impossible to ignore. One by one, the smiles faded, replaced by raised eyebrows, widened eyes, and tentative nods. The mocking whispers ceased, replaced by a quiet that seemed almost sacred. Even those who had laughed now found themselves drawn into the sound, unable to look away, unable to deny the beauty in front of them. She opened her eyes slightly, noticing the change in the room. It wasn't triumph yet, not entirely. The first part of her journey had only begun, and she knew the real test was ahead. Could she keep this magic alive? Could she continue to move hearts, one note at a time, in a room that had once doubted her? The answer rested in the music, in the way her hands flowed across the keys, in the silent determination that refused to be broken by judgment or sneers. She played on, letting the soft melody grow, allowing it to fill every corner of the hall. There were moments when her fingers hesitated, when a note didn't sound quite right. But she recovered quickly, letting intuition guide her. The crowd felt it too, the authenticity, the rawness, the truth that couldn't be faked. No one could ignore it. Even the skeptics had to listen, had to admit that what they were hearing was something real, something special. The first part of her performance, though quiet, had already shifted the atmosphere. People who had once mocked were now watching, leaning forward slightly, trying to catch every nuance. Some clutched their drinks a little tighter, almost afraid to break the spell. The energy in the room was subtle, but growing. A slow realization that this young woman whom they had dismissed was not what she seemed. There was talent, there was heart. There was something undeniable waiting to shine, and she knew it. She didn't play for applause, not yet. She played because the music had to exist, because the world deserved to hear what she had kept hidden for so long. And though the room was still cautious, still skeptical in parts, a seed had been planted. A seed of surprise, of respect, of curiosity. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there, and it would grow. As the soft notes drifted into the corners of the hall, she felt a quiet satisfaction. The first moment had passed, the first impression had been made, and it was stronger than anyone could have expected. Her journey was only beginning, but the first step, the first notes, had set everything in motion. People would remember this night, even if they didn't realize it yet. Something had shifted in the air, something unspoken but powerful. And it all started with her courage to sit down and play. No one in that hall would forget the quiet young woman who had walked in, unnoticed, mocked by a few, and yet had managed to capture the attention of many. The world, for a brief moment, had stopped judging. It had started listening. And that was exactly where she wanted to begin. The evening stretched on, and while the soft melody continued, she felt a sense of calm determination. Every note she struck was a small victory over doubt. Every chord a message to herself and to everyone who had underestimated her. She wasn't just playing music, she was making a statement without words. The world could mock all it wanted, but the music, her music, could not be denied. And in that quiet, subtle way, the hidden piano star had begun to shine. The first soft notes still lingered in the hall, echoing in corners where people hadn't expected them to reach. She paused for a moment, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, letting the sound fade, allowing the room to breathe. The audience was watching her now with more attention, though not everyone was convinced. Some shifted in their chairs, unsure of what to expect next. A few whispered among themselves, curiosity mixing with lingering doubt. Maybe she can play more than just a simple tune. One voice said quietly, almost afraid to be heard. Another shook her head, muttering, "We'll see." It wasn't derision now, but caution, as if the crowd was testing themselves, trying to see if the quiet young woman before them could really carry a melody that mattered. She sensed it all, but did not let it distract her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all eyes on her. Her heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from excitement. She had imagined this moment countless times, but imagining was different from experiencing. Now, every person in the room mattered, every whisper mattered, every glance mattered, and she was ready. Slowly, she pressed the keys again, letting the sound flow more confidently this time. The melody began to grow, stretching across the hall, filling the space with warmth and energy. Her hands moved with precision. Guided by years of practice and countless nights spent alone in small rooms with only the piano for company, each note was deliberate, soft but clear, carrying emotion that words could never express. She played with a rhythm that seemed natural, flowing, almost as if the piano itself was alive and responding to her touch. Some in the crowd leaned forward, intrigued. They had expected a small performance, perhaps a few simple chords. But what they heard was richer than anything they had imagined. There was a depth to her playing that made people stop their chatter, put down their drinks, and focus. The skeptical whispers had faded, replaced by quiet fascination. Eyes followed her hands as they moved across the keys, absorbing every movement. She felt the energy shift subtly. The music was connecting, reaching the hearts of people who had once dismissed her. She could feel their surprise, their disbelief, their growing curiosity. Each note she struck seemed to carry a story, a memory, a dream she had nurtured in silence. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was her voice, her shield, her way of communicating in a language that everyone could understand, even without knowing her name. A man near the back crossed his arms, watching carefully. He had arrived expecting something unremarkable. Brief interruption in his evening, perhaps even a reason to smile at someone's failure. But now he was unsure. The notes were not simple, the rhythm not awkward. There was intention, skill, and something else. Something that made him stop judging and start listening. He leaned forward slightly, his skepticism softening. She noticed none of the specific reactions, but she felt the change in the room. People were no longer speaking to each other. They were listening, focusing, allowing the music to pull them in. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile, not out of pride, but out of connection. This was what she had wanted, what she had worked toward. The moment of being heard had begun. It was stronger than she had imagined. The melody shifted slightly, gaining strength. She played faster, letting her emotions guide her fingers. Joy, frustration, hope, and determination, all of it, came through in her music. People could feel it even if they did not know why. The notes carried meaning without explanation. A few people in the audience exchanged glances, their surprise clear. "She can really play," one whispered. "I didn't expect this at all," another admitted. The air was charged now. It's filled with an invisible energy that only music could create. A young woman standing near the side pressed her hand over her mouth, unable to stop herself from being moved. She had expected nothing and received everything. Her eyes glistened slightly, and she looked around to see if others were reacting the same way. They were faces once filled with doubt, were now lit with awe. The music had found a way to reach everyone, bypassing judgment, bypassing expectations. She allowed herself to close her eyes again, feeling the notes flowing under her fingers. Each key she pressed was deliberate, each pause intentional. She did not rush, but neither did she hold back. The room seemed to bend around the melody, time stretching slightly as people allowed themselves to be caught in the music. Some tapped their feet, others swayed gently, caught by the rhythm, the emotion, the honesty. She played a sequence that was softer now, a gentle section that felt like a conversation. It was intimate, almost fragile. The audience leaned in unconsciously, as if trying not to disturb the delicate moment. The music spoke of vulnerability, of moments when dreams felt impossible, of nights spent working alone, when the world never seemed to notice. There was a humanity in the notes that could not be ignored. Even the most critical in the room could not look away. The laughter, the mocking whispers, the sideways glances, they had disappeared. In their place was silence, respectful and expectant. They wanted to see what she would do next, what she could create. The young woman behind the piano was no longer a figure to be judged. She was a presence to be felt, an artist at work, story unfolding in sound. She allowed the music to swell again, rising and falling, carrying energy through the room. People felt it physically, the vibrations of the piano echoing in the walls and their chests. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, forgetting everything else. A few were caught off guard by the intensity, surprised that someone so quiet could produce such power. The melody changed once more, becoming more intricate. She played with confidence now, fingers moving swiftly, skillfully, each note deliberate. She had reached a place where she did not think about judgment or doubt. She only thought about the music, letting it guide her entirely. The audience could feel the transformation, the shift from hesitation to mastery, and it was mesmerizing. A man sitting near the front leaned forward, resting his chin in his hand. He had arrived with an air of superiority, expecting something minor, but now he could not take his eyes off the keys. Every chord seemed to pull him deeper into the story she was telling. He felt a mixture of disbelief and admiration, emotions he hadn't expected to experience in this hall tonight. She noticed the subtle shifts around her. People holding their breath during soft passages, leaning in during intricate sections, some even exchanging astonished glances. The room was alive with attention, shared energy that she could feel in the vibrations of the piano and the stillness of the crowd. It was no longer about proving herself to anyone. It was about creating a space where everyone could feel something real. The melody slowed slightly now. It's becoming more reflective. She let her fingers linger over certain notes, allowing them to resonate, to hang in the air. There was a softness here, a tenderness, a human story being told without a single word. People shifted in their seats, leaning closer to catch the nuances. Letting themselves be carried along by the honesty of her playing, she felt a rush of emotion herself. It was not fear, not pride, not anxiety. It was something simple and pure: connection. The music was a bridge between her world and theirs, a shared experience that no one could deny. She had imagined this feeling countless times, but now it was real, tangible, overwhelming in the most wonderful way. The softer passage gave way to a gentle crescendo, a rise in energy that felt like hope. Her fingers danced across the keys with fluidity, letting the notes lift off the piano and into the room. People responded unconsciously, leaning, swaying, letting the music carry them. The hall, once filled with casual chatter and quiet judgment, had become a place of quiet wonder, all attention focused on the young woman and her piano. Some faces were filled with awe, some with disbelief, and some with a strange, quiet respect. The shift was subtle but profound. No one had expected this. No one had imagined that someone so unassuming could hold the room in such a delicate, powerful way. And yet, here she was, creating an experience that everyone would carry with them long after the evening ended. She slowed again, bringing the melody down to a softer, more intimate tone. Her fingers traced familiar patterns, each note carrying emotion, memory, hope, and a subtle vulnerability. People leaned in closer, drawn to the sincerity in every sound. It was not about impressing anyone. It was about letting the music be what it was: pure, honest, and human. A quiet murmur ran through the crowd, not of doubt or mockery, but of recognition. People who had arrived thinking this would be a minor distraction now realized they were witnessing something rare. The young woman who had been dismissed, underestimated, and overlooked was revealing a talent that could not be ignored. She was showing them the truth about her abilities, the hidden depth they had failed to see at first glance. As she continued, she felt a sense of calm and certainty. The initial hesitation had passed, replaced by a growing confidence. She was no longer playing for anyone else's approval. She was playing for the music, for herself, and for the quiet connection forming in the room. Each note carried intention, each pause a breath shared with the audience. Each chord a message of authenticity and presence. By the time she reached the final gentle notes of this section, the crowd had completely transformed. The first skepticism had vanished. The whispers of doubt were gone. All that remained was quiet attention, the kind that demands respect and invites wonder. She allowed herself a small smile. Not of triumph, but of gratitude for the music. For the moment, for the invisible bond forming between her and those listening. And in that calm, delicate space, the hidden piano star continued to shine. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but with quiet strength that promised even greater wonders to come. The gentle notes hung in the air for a moment, fading softly, like the last light of sunset over a quiet city. She paused, letting her hands hover above the keys. The room had gone completely still. The energy in the hall was different now. It was no longer polite attention or casual curiosity. Something had shifted. People were waiting, almost holding their breath, wondering what would come next. There was a quiet tension, a sense that something remarkable was about to happen. She felt it too, a deep, quiet thrill running through her. The music had opened a door, a small window into her world, and now it was time to step fully through it. She pressed the keys again, but this time with more strength, more intention. The melody changed, growing bolder, more confident, more alive. It was no longer a soft conversation. It had become a story that demanded attention. It asked the room to listen, to feel, and to believe. The first few notes caught some off guard. They were not simple or easy. They were complex, layered, and precise. Fingers danced across the keys with fluidity, moving faster than some in the audience could follow. Yet every note had purpose. Every chord had meaning. There was a rhythm here that could not be ignored. A voice in the music that spoke louder than words ever could. A man sitting near the front leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his face a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. He had arrived thinking he would watch someone play a minor, unimportant tune. He had expected perhaps a few nice notes, maybe a touch of talent. But now he was witnessing something far beyond what he could have imagined. His eyes widened as he realized that the music was not just good, it was extraordinary. The young woman at the piano did not notice him specifically, nor did she need to. Her focus was entirely on the music, on the story she wanted to tell, on the emotions she wanted to share. She allowed her heart to guide her fingers, letting instinct and feeling take the lead. The notes flowed faster, more boldly, carrying energy that the audience could feel in their chests. It was impossible not to feel it. The music had transformed from soft curiosity into undeniable presence. People began to shift in their seats. Some leaned forward, trying to catch every subtle variation. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, letting themselves be carried away. A few whispered quietly to each other, their voices tinged with awe. "I didn't expect this," one said. "Neither did I," replied another. There was no laughter, no mockery, just attention, respect, growing wonder. The melody changed again, rising and falling with unexpected emotion. There was a section that felt almost playful, light and energetic. It's a sudden contrast to the depth and strength of the previous notes. It caught some people by surprise. A few even smiled, unable to contain their delight. But then it shifted, moving into a darker, more intense passage. It was a sound that spoke of struggle, of longing, of dreams that had been kept hidden. The audience could feel the tension, the urgency. The story behind each note, she was no longer thinking about proving herself. She was not focused on who had doubted her, who had whispered behind their hands, who had mocked her quiet presence. The music was bigger than all of that. It was about connection, about sharing something real, about letting the room experience what she had felt for so long alone in her practice. The piano became an extension of her body, of her emotions, of her soul. A young man near the back leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He had been skeptical from the start, perhaps even expecting the performance to be amusing in a trivial way. Now, he could not take his eyes off her hands. He felt an unexpected thrill as the music unfolded, a recognition that this was not just skill, but artistry. It was raw, genuine, and unpretentious. Every note carried honesty. Every chord carried intention. She played faster now, letting the excitement build, letting the music take her where it wanted to go. The room felt alive. People shifted in their seats, some tapping their feet, some swaying gently, all feeling the pulse of the sound that filled the air. Even those who had been dismissive or quiet now found themselves captivated. The music had found a way to reach everyone, bypassing doubt, bypassing expectation. Touching something deep inside, the melody became more intricate, more daring. She added small flourishes, delicate runs of notes that danced lightly over the main theme. It was a skillful combination of precision and emotion, of discipline and freedom. The audience could feel the tension in each note, the careful balance between control and passion. Some leaned closer to catch the subtleties, their faces showing astonishment and admiration. The young woman allowed herself to smile slightly, but only for a moment. It was not a smile of triumph, but a quiet acknowledgement of the connection forming in the room. She felt it everywhere, in the way people leaned forward, in the subtle movements of their heads, in the silence that had settled over those who had once whispered mockery. The music had reached them, had drawn them in, had claimed their attention in a way she had never experienced outside her private practice. A soft murmur ran through the crowd, not of doubt, not of judgment, but of recognition, of shared realization. The audience was collectively realizing that they were witnessing something rare, something extraordinary. There was no denying it. They had come expecting nothing, and now they were experiencing an artist at the height of her abilities. Even if she herself had only just begun to feel it fully. She shifted again, moving into a section that was more reflective, more personal. The notes became slower, more deliberate, more intimate. It was as if she were sharing her own memories, her own emotions, her own struggles with everyone in the room. Some people closed their eyes, letting themselves be carried by the melody, feeling the story without needing words. Others watched closely, trying to capture every gesture, every expression, every subtle shift of energy in her performance. There were moments of tension, sudden rises and falls, unexpected pauses that kept the audience on edge. The music was alive, unpredictable, human. It reflected both her skill and her heart, both her training and her emotions. She was no longer just a performer. She was a storyteller, a guide, a bridge between her world and theirs. Every note was a sentence, every chord a paragraph, every melody a chapter in a story that had waited years to be told. The energy in the room continued to grow. People who had arrived late, thinking it was only background music, were now fully immersed. They leaned in as they entered, noticing the intensity, the focus, the passion. Some exchanged quiet glances, recognizing that they had underestimated her. Others sat silently, eyes fixed on the piano, unable to look away. It was impossible not to feel the pull of the music, the emotional current that ran from her hands to their hearts. She reached a section that was more powerful, more dramatic. The notes rang out with authority, the rhythm carrying confidence and strength. The audience reacted unconsciously, leaning forward, holding their breath, feeling the weight of the sound. Some faces showed disbelief, others showed admiration. Some even showed tears beginning to form. It was a rare combination of skill and emotion, executed with clarity and honesty. The young woman's fingers moved effortlessly, yet every movement was precise, intentional, meaningful. She was fully present, completely absorbed in the music, unaware of individual reactions, yet profoundly aware of the connection forming with everyone listening. The piano became a vessel for something larger than herself, something that could touch hearts, move minds, and create shared experience. The crescendo built, each chord more powerful than the last. The audience felt it physically, the vibrations traveling through the room, through their bodies, through their very spirits. Some people had tears in their eyes, some had hands clasped, some simply sat in stunned silence. The music demanded attention, respect, and emotion. It was impossible not to be drawn in. It's possible not to feel. She played with a balance of control and freedom, combining technical skill with raw feeling. The passages flowed seamlessly, each transition smooth yet expressive. There was a beauty in the precision, a beauty in the vulnerability, a beauty in the power she wielded through her instrument. It was mesmerizing, compelling, unforgettable. By the time she reached a softer, slower section, the crowd had completely transformed. The skeptics were gone, the mockers silenced, the indifferent now captivated. Every person present was experiencing something rare, something personal yet shared. Something that would remain with them long after the last note faded. She had turned doubt into wonder, judgment into respect, expectation into awe. The music became more introspective, each note deliberate, each pause meaningful. She allowed herself a brief moment to feel the connection fully, to understand the impact of her performance. This was more than talent. It was truth, honesty, courage, and persistence. The audience was responding to the entirety of her journey, not just the notes, not just the skill, but the story behind it. As the final section of this part of the performance approached, she felt a sense of quiet triumph. Not pride, but fulfillment. The room was alive with attention, emotion, and anticipation. People were no longer spectators. They were participants, sharing in the story. Feeling what she had to say through music, she struck the final notes of this dramatic section with clarity, precision, and heart. The hall seemed to vibrate with the sound. Silence followed immediately. Not awkward or tense, but full, heavy, and reverent. The audience simply absorbed it, processing what they had just experienced. And in that moment, the young woman at the piano had achieved something remarkable. She had captured their hearts, their minds, and their attention completely. No one could look at her the same way again. The quiet, unassuming figure they had once mocked was gone, replaced by a presence they could not ignore. She had proven without words that talent could not be measured by appearances, that judgment could be misleading, and that true artistry always finds a way to shine. And in that silence, that moment of awe, the hidden piano star continued to glow, stronger and brighter than ever before, ready to take the next step, to reach even deeper, and to show the world the full extent of her brilliance. The hall had changed completely since she had begun to play. What had once been a space filled with chatter, whispers, and casual judgment was now entirely consumed by sound, by feeling, by presence. Every person in the room was leaning forward, their eyes fixed on the piano, on her hands, on the story unfolding in front of them. The energy was palpable, almost alive. It's vibrating in the air and settling deep in the chests of everyone listening. She sat at the piano, her posture calm yet focused, fingers poised above the keys. She did not rush, for she knew that the power of music lay not only in speed or technical skill, but in intention, in the ability to make every note matter. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the connection to the instrument beneath her fingers, to the audience before her, and to the story she wanted to tell. Then, slowly, she began again. This time with a section that demanded the full attention of every listener. The first notes were quiet, delicate, almost like a whisper in a vast space. They carried an emotion so pure that people in the room shifted instinctively, their bodies responding even before their minds could fully grasp it. There was a softness here, a vulnerability, a feeling that seemed to reach into the very heart of each person. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling it in their chest, in their stomach, in their mind. She allowed the melody to grow gradually, each note building on the one before. There was a story in the sound, one of struggle and perseverance, of dreams nurtured in secret, of patience and quiet determination. People in the audience could sense it, even if they had never known her story. The music spoke for her, revealing a life lived with passion and dedication, a life spent perfecting something beautiful without seeking approval. A man near the back leaned forward, resting his arms on the chair in front of him. He had come expecting entertainment, perhaps even a little amusement, but now he found himself completely absorbed. The subtle intricacies of the performance, the emotion behind every chord, the deliberate pacing it, all held him in awe. He could feel the intensity in the rise and fall of the melody, the power in the crescendos, the intimacy in the quiet moments. It was impossible to look away. The room became completely silent, save for the music. Even those who had once whispered or smiled in doubt now sat, frozen in attention. The piano's voice filled every corner, reaching every ear, touching every heart. There was a weight to the notes, a presence that could not be denied. It was no longer about talent alone. It was about connection, about something deeper than skill. It was about the truth of human emotion, expressed without words, but understood by all. Her hands moved effortlessly across the keys now, each motion precise yet fluid. She was no longer thinking about the audience, nor about the reactions she had evoked earlier. Her mind and heart were fully absorbed in the music, in the story that needed to be told. The performance was no longer a simple demonstration of ability. It had become a living thing. Breathing, pulsing, speaking, people began to lean forward even more, as if drawn by some invisible force. Eyes widened, mouths opened slightly, some faces even showing the beginnings of tears. The music was reaching places that words could not reach, stirring feelings that had lain dormant. Some people felt memories rising to the surface. Some felt hope. Some felt joy. Some felt a bittersweet sadness that they could not explain. Every note, every pause, every chord carried a power that demanded attention. The melody shifted, rising to a dramatic, powerful section. She pressed the keys with force and precision, creating a sound that filled the hall with intensity and passion. The audience felt it physically, a vibration that seemed to move through the floor, into their seats, into their very bodies. Some leaned forward instinctively, some held their breath, some felt chills run down their spines. The music was no longer just a sound, it was a force, unstoppable and overwhelming. A woman sitting near the side placed her hands over her chest, feeling the impact of the music as if it were something tangible. Her eyes glistened as she tried to hold back tears, overwhelmed by the emotion in every note. Others in the audience mirrored her response in their own ways, some pressing their hands to their mouths, some closing their eyes, some simply staring in astonishment. The young woman at the piano had moved them all, not through words, not through showmanship, but through truth. She allowed herself a small, fleeting smile, though it was hidden behind concentration. It was not a smile of vanity or pride, but of satisfaction, of understanding that the connection was real, that the effort, the years of practice, the quiet moments alone had led to this. The music had reached them, touched them, transformed them, and she could feel it. There was no greater reward than this shared experience, this invisible thread connecting her to everyone in the room. The melody became even more intricate, with subtle runs of notes that danced lightly over the deeper chords. Each movement was precise, yet it felt effortless. People in the room leaned closer, trying to capture every nuance, every slight variation, every delicate transition. There was a sense of awe in the air, an acknowledgement of something rare and extraordinary. They had never seen anything like this before, and they knew they were witnessing something special. A man in the back, who had remained skeptical from the beginning, now found himself completely absorbed. His initial disbelief had melted away, replaced by admiration and respect. He could feel the story in the music, the passion, the dedication, the honesty. He realized that this performance was more than just skill, it was authenticity. A glimpse into the heart and soul of someone who had dedicated herself to something she loved, quietly and patiently, waiting for the right moment to share it. She transitioned smoothly into a softer, more reflective passage. The notes became slower, more deliberate, more intimate. It was as if she were speaking directly to each listener individually, sharing her own experiences, her own dreams, her own struggles. The audience felt it, even if they had never known her life. The music carried emotion that could not be spoken, feelings that resonated deep within the heart. Some people closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, absorbing every vibration, every nuance. Others watched her hands with rapt attention, amazed by the speed, precision, and emotion in every movement. The contrast between the delicate passages and the powerful crescendos created a dynamic tension that held everyone in the room completely captive. It was a journey, not just a performance, and they were traveling with her. The crescendo began again, slow at first, then growing, rising with intensity, building anticipation. carrying everyone along on a wave of sound. The energy in the room was electric, charged with emotion and awe. People could feel the passion in her hands, in the piano, in the space around them. It was impossible not to be swept along, impossible not to be moved. The young woman had captured them fully, body, mind, soul. A young man sitting near the front could not help but whisper to the person beside him, "This is incredible. She's incredible." The words were soft, but full of awe. Others nodded silently, unable to speak, caught in the spell of the music. The hall itself seemed to breathe with the melody, expanding and contracting with every note, every chord, every pause. The performance was no longer just a series of sounds. It was an experience, a living, breathing entity that had claimed the room. She allowed herself to close her eyes for a moment, feeling the connection fully. The music had become more than notes. It was an extension of herself, a reflection of every quiet night, every solitary practice, every moment she had believed in the power of sound to communicate what words could not. The audience was responding not just to her skill, but to her truth, her heart, her soul. Every chord resonated with authenticity, every note carried emotion, every pause held meaning. The music swelled to a climax, each note striking with precision and power. The audience felt it physically, emotionally, spiritually. Some had tears streaming down their faces, some were trembling with emotion. Some sat in stunned silence, unable to move, unable to speak. The young woman at the piano had reached them completely, had shared herself fully, and had left them breathless. The final notes of the crescendo rang out, powerful and clear, filling the hall with resonance. She let them hang in the air, letting the vibrations settle over everyone present. Silence followed, heavy, profound, complete. It was not awkward or uncomfortable. It was reverent, filled with recognition of the brilliance they had just witnessed. People looked at each other, unsure what to say, unable to find words that could match what they had felt. She allowed herself a deep breath, her hands resting lightly on the keys. The music had reached its peak, the story had been told, and the audience had been completely transformed. What had started as doubt, curiosity, or even mockery had turned into awe, respect, and admiration. The quiet, unassuming woman at the piano had captivated them, touched them, and left a mark on their hearts. Some people were still frozen, absorbing the moment, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. Others began to clap softly, unsure of when to start, hesitant to break the spell. And then the applause began to grow, slowly at first, then stronger, louder, more insistent. People rose to their feet, some cheering, some wiping tears, all recognizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The young woman at the piano did not smile widely or look for attention. She remained calm, serene, letting the applause wash over her as a quiet acknowledgement, not a reward. She had shared her music fully, and the reaction, though overwhelming, was only a reflection of the connection she had created in that moment. The room was full of energy, full of wonder, full of respect. Every person present had been touched in some way, had experienced something rare, and would carry it with them long after the evening ended. The hidden piano star had shone brightly, not for herself, but for everyone who had been lucky enough to listen, and the impact was undeniable.